Greetings, bird people of Earth. It's time for Out There with the Birds, the podcast that's magically delicious, with your hosts, Ben Lizdas and Bill Thompson III. Out There with the Birds is supported by Koa Sport Optics, makers of the legendary 883 Prominar spotting scope. Visit sportingoptics.koa-usa.com to learn more. Out There with the Birds is also supported by the Reader Rendezvous Birding Adventures from Birdwatchers Digest. Come birding with us in our favorite places. Learn more at birdwatchersdigest.com/RR. And now, here they are, Bill and Ben.
Okay, Ben, you're back in the home nest for another episode of Out There with the Birds. Welcome back to the USA.
Yeah, I'm back for about 20 hours, I think.
Yeah, and then you're headed back south, but not as far south as you've been. So
no passport required.
Where have you been? Tell us where you've been.
Oh, well, I just got back from another trip to Costa Rica. This time I was there not so much on a birding tour experience like I was last time, but I was there for a conference that was being done by Holbrook Travel. It was a get-together of different nonprofits and academic people, government agencies, talking about kind of programming for bird watchers, wanting a greater understanding of bird watching culture.
Okay.
So bird watching in the mornings, got to go to La Selva Biological Station, which is such a fantastic birding place in Costa Rica. It's certainly for lowland birding in Costa Rica, it might be my favorite place to go there.
Oh, nice.
And one of the most unexpected birds that I saw there, and I wasn't expecting to see this on this whole trip at all, was an umbrella bird.
Oh, cool.
It was so unexpected because we were in secondary forest and no one was, really thinking it just wasn't on anyone's radar. And it just comes popping up into the cecropia tree, maybe 5 feet above my head, not very far at all. And just based on its behavior, this large black bird, initially I just wanted to call it a guan.
Right.
But after I took a second look at it, and the guide who was there from La Selva, she was just gobsmacked to see it. She said she had never seen one.
Wow.
In that part of the forest ever in her 20-some years of being there, and we were all just kind of blown away. And the highlight of the trip right there, the whole trip. The highlight of probably my last 2 trips birding to Costa Rica was maybe that umbrella bird.
Oh, my last 2 trips in the last 30 days to Costa Rica, because everybody heard episode 23 where it was just you by yourself in Costa Rica talking to all your pals down there. I wasn't jealous at all. But umbrella birds are really cool. They come in very handy when it's raining, I've noticed.
Oh, interesting. If you can get your hands on one.
That's right. So you also saw a sunbittern down there, didn't you?
Yeah, that was in the first time around. The trip prior to this.
Okay.
It's
so hard to keep these Costa Rica trips straight. The last time I was in Costa Rica. No, it wasn't the last time. It was the time before that.
Yes.
Oh, geez.
Yes, we had sunbittern. That was one of the highlight birds, as was pearl kite.
Nice.
These are those birds when you're looking through any field guide of any place you're going to go to, there's these aspirational birds where, for me anyways, I don't have a lot of context to put them in terms of the habitat or part of the country and whatnot. So I'm just looking through these field guides at pictures, and it's like a picture book saying, wouldn't it be nice to see one of those? And pearl kite had stood out to me in the Costa Rica guide for a long time. And Dylan from Birding Eco Tours, who's on our team for the Costa Rica Birding Challenge, we were just walking down some road. There it was, just up in this some tree in a field. It was like a pasture almost, and it was just sitting up there on top of this acacia tree. And I was just, he's like, pearl kite, there it is. And what a adorable little bird.
Little known fact, that was the original name for Eddie Vedder's band. Was pearl kite.
Really? Really?
Yeah,
I wonder.
Then
the marketers got involved.
Yeah, they did. And they said, no. We need jam, pearl jam. He said, what about pearl jelly? No.
No.
Jam. So anyway, you gave a talk down there, and give us the 30-second roundup of what your talk was about.
Yeah. No PowerPoint presentation here, but I'm talking a little bit about how do you get your hands wrapped around what birder demographics look like in the United States? And
right.
You get these crazy numbers all over the place in terms of how many bird watchers there are in the United States. And there's a lot of, as you know, there's not a consensus on that. And and my talk was basically like, well, before we can really figure out the number of what we call birders, we should probably define what we call birders. And essentially we try to figure out, well, what kinds of birders are there? And this, where I think traditionally those of us in the bird watching, we'll say business, have kind of had a tendency of dividing birders in two camps. You've got your backyard birders and your, I guess what you'd call a serious birder,
a field birder,
a field birder.
Yeah.
And that's like two different types of birders, but I think there's a lot more going on there. So when you think about different birder types, I think of like my mother-in-law. She is what I would call a resistor, someone who does not identify as a bird watcher. She subscribes to a bird watching magazine. She has bird feeders all over her yard. She owns binoculars. She attends one or two bird watching events every year. Yet if I were to go up to her and say, hey, Weege, do you consider yourself to be a bird watcher? She'd say, oh, no, I'm not a bird watcher.
Wait, what's her name? Weege?
It's Louise, but everyone calls her Weege.
Okay, you can't just throw something like that out there and not expect me to ask about it. Hey, Weege, what's that cheese you're eating?
She is Wisconsinite through and through. Her family owns a cheese factory here in Wisconsin. So, in fact, Christine, my wife, was telling me as we were going through security in Costa Rica how when her and her mom were traveling internationally last time, her mom got in trouble for trying to bring cheese abroad.
Sure.
Because she just travels with cheese. She's like, I just bring my own cheese where I go places. So, but
wasn't that a John Steinbeck novel, Travels with Cheese? I'm not sure. Maybe it was.
So anyways, so she is one of those birder types out there that I would refer to as the resistor, people who don't call themselves birders, but any of us would look at and say, wait, you do all this bird watching related stuff, but you wouldn't consider yourself a bird watcher or birder. So, so talking about, people like that might be one type of bird watcher. And then of course you do have your backyard kind of bird watching, those people who, if they could adopt birds legally, they would. They kind of just want to bring them into their house and they want them to be part of their family, right? So you've got that type of bird watcher, and then amongst the field birders, I think people are motivated by different things to go bird watching. You've got what some people would call the listers. I would refer to them as the achiever. People who are motivated to bird by having just accomplishing things. They're accomplishment motivated bird watchers. So they're going to always chase their rarities. The people always looking on the listserv to find rarities. They're always trying to hone their skills. But as well as I do that I don't think that makes up the majority of bird watchers we interact with.
No, it doesn't.
I think the majority of bird watchers are people out there who I would call community seekers. Folks who just they're drawn to birding because it's a group that has similar interests to them.
It's a social circle, yeah.
It's a social circle of people who like to be outdoors, who are naturally curious. They have maybe an interest in science. These are lifelong learners who want to find engaging, smart people to spend time with, and it's a social aspect. These are the people who on field trips, you're always looking behind them and saying, "Shh, can you be quiet?" They're always the ones chatting in the back,
right.
About a whole host of things, maybe some of it about birds. But I think that makes a good chunk of bird watchers, because birding is it's an experience related activity.
Yeah,
and
it is. Well,
a lot of birds like to share those experiences.
Yeah, that's a clever sort of overview of the different types of birders. I would agree. And it's a complicated thing trying to divide people into demographic groups, because where do you put the line dividing this group from that group? But yeah. I like those categories you have. Speaking of social birding, and speaking of the the sociability of bird watchers, we've got some upcoming rendezvous, which are all about the fun and the connection and the community of birding. So these Reader Rendezvous are trips that we started doing a few years back for Birdwatchers Digest subscribers. And those of our audience who've listened to our podcast know that we have a mention about rendezvous in here as a sponsor. How would you describe the rendezvous experience? Because you've now been on a year's worth of rendezvous.
A year's worth of Reader Rendezvous. And, it's a great opportunity for you and I to get a chance to hang out face to face with people who read Birdwatchers Digest and, people we run into at birding festivals, Facebook friends. So we get a chance to interact face to face with people who are fans of the content that we're generating, the products we're producing, and that's one of the things I love most about it. I mean, I have in 17 years of being involved in bird watching from a kind of a business perspective when I was selling optics, and now working with Birdwatchers Digest and producing things like this podcast. I've had a chance to study birders almost as much as I've studied birds, and being able to and I'm just such a sociable person. I love being with people, showing them birds. So for me, the experience of the rendezvous isn't so much going to, say, Titusville, Florida, to see all the great birds there. That's a wonderful experience. I take that for granted that there's going to be great birds there. But for me, when I come back home and reflect on the time I had there, it's always the people who we got to hang out with and the conversations we've got to have with people. See, it's some of the interesting people that you get to meet and the things that they do. And I don't know, that's like the richness right there. There's the diversity in birders complements the diversity in birds that we get to see on these rendezvous, which is really, I think, a lot of fun. And to a T, it's always good company.
Right.
Yeah. Because I guess we sort of selected for people who have common interests with us, right?
Yeah, you're right. We are fishing in a very select pond and catching the people to go on these trips with us. What I love about it is I realized some years ago when I'd written a few books and I was getting invited to go to festivals to speak, and they would ask me, "Hey, would you lead some field trips?" And I really enjoyed that. I mean, I really enjoy taking people out and helping them find birds and helping them enhance their birding experience. And so I'm really looking forward to our Space Coast rendezvous in late January, the last day of January and the first few days of February down in Titusville area, because we're calling that one Birding Basics and Beyond. And what we're going to do is just really take it easy out in the field. We'll see great birds, but we'll lock it down in a few places and just work the technique, work on the birding skills, work on the ID tips and stuff like that. We've got Catherine Hamilton coming to do field sketching, which is one of the best ways to enhance your birding skills.
This brings me to another one of the birder personality types that I think is out there, which is one of my favorites to hang out with, and that is the casual novice. People who are just starting to look for that on-ramp into birding, trying to understand what it's about, but they don't necessarily have the full view of bird behavior, the seasonality of bird watching, perhaps the topography of birds or bird identification. Maybe they don't understand kind of how birds are organized in a field guide, but they love being outdoors and they're super curious, because birding with these people, to me, it's like you could show them, tufted titmice and ruby-crowned kinglets and some of these birds that perhaps people who've been birding for a while, like you and I, we maybe take for granted, but they light up with enthusiasm to learn about some of these birds that we can, and we can have this, I guess, sense of rediscovering the joy of birding by interacting with these people. And I would say it's just as rewarding for me to bird with them, maybe even more so, that type of birder, the casual novice type, than it would be to bird with a really high achiever, someone with super birding skills that way outpace my own, because once again, the fun factor is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing. We try to make sure everybody sees every bird. We try to make sure everybody's having a good time. We're constantly sort of taking the temperature of the group. And
what's rule number 1 of the Reader Rendezvous?
Let's have fun.
That's right. And what's rule number 2 of the Reader Rendezvous?
There are no such thing as stupid questions.
No, I thought rule number 2 was let's have fun.
No, that's rule number 3.
Okay.
Except for you. Your rules are, number 1, let's go to Costa Rica. Rule number 2 is let's go back to Costa Rica. So we got one other rendezvous that's currently open for registration. I think we've got maybe a dozen places left on the Florida Birding Basics and Beyond.
Yeah, and that's in the Titusville area, Merritt National Wildlife Refuge. You're talking limpkins and
Bachman sparrow, red cockaded woodpecker, snail kite. I mean, it's going to be awesome. All the glamorous wading birds. Great for photography. So that's going to be super fun. And we'll be down there for the Space Coast Birding Festival. And then our event is the week after that. So we'll get to poach any of their awesome sightings that they have. And then we've also got coming up in June, I think it's June 22 to 26, we've got Colorado Rocky Mountain High. birding.
Yes.
That rendezvous is going to be sweet because I haven't been birding out west for a while, and I haven't been birding up in the Rocky Mountains. So that one's going to be fun because it's going to be start off in Pawnee grasslands, the last remnant bit of the Great Plains grassland ecosystem. We'll be looking for mountain plover and a couple of different kinds of long spurs and ferruginous hawk, golden eagle, prairie falcon. It's going to be sweet. Next day we're in the foothills.
The landscape out there is so fantastic, isn't it?
Next day we're in the foothills, kind of working our way through some of the woodpeckers and some of the western birds like Woodhouse's scrub jay, that recent split from western scrub jay. Then we're going to be, the next 2 days, we're going to be up at altitude at Rocky Mountain National Park looking for brown-capped rosy finch and white-tailed ptarmigan and some other, I mean, it's just
Clark's nutcrackers, pinion jays. And that is, birding at a place like that has such a majestic backdrop. That is a total experience enhancer to me as someone who's I have a love of landscape as well. And, the Florida one's going to be coastal, relatively flat, beachy. And then to contrast that with the Rocky Mountain, region and the birds that we see there, I can't wait. And like you, I haven't birded as much in the out west, especially the Rocky Mountain area, as I'd like to. We're fortunate to have Carl Bendorf helping us guide that. He runs a Colorado Birding Adventures and board member of the American Birding Association, really involved in youth birding as well. Fantastic birder, really fun guy. Glad he's going to join us, and really, he lives out there.
Yeah.
So really, have that local knowledge of the best places to go, best times to be there. I think we're set up for a home run on that one.
Well, and coming up about the time that this podcast will be live, available for listening, we've got the Rock and Roll Rendezvous. That one's sold out. It's in Cleveland in very end of November. I've gotten some reports already. There's saw-whet owls, long-eared owls. We're hoping that some of these cold fronts will maybe bring in a snowy owl. We've got a potential to see 6 owl species on that rendezvous, in addition to a backstage tour with our friend Buster Banish of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So
that's the rock and roll aspect of it. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes. Yeah. So we're probably going to play a game, like we often have some sort of a get to know you orientation for people on the first night. I think we're going to probably play some sort of game where we'll have dead rock stars and dead famous ornithologists, and you'll put it on your back, and you'll have to guess who, one of those party games where you go around and guess, now am I someone who's living or dead? I think we'll just go with all dead people, so that'll make it easy. I mean, dead rock stars, who doesn't love that, Well, the dead rock stars don't love that. But
yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Anyway, speaking of rock, I have a throwback music recommendation, if you're ready.
Oh, a throwback music recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm thinking most of the music recommendations that I've gotten from you have been relatively contemporary. I think there was a Bob Dylan.
It was a Bob Dylan, yeah.
But that was for, I guess, one of his more recent albums. So yeah, I wouldn't classify that as a throwback. So I'm curious about this one here. Is this going to be a throwback rock artist who is sort of come back to the stage and has something new coming out, or is this a throwback reference to a throwback material?
I don't believe this band currently exists. I'm going back to 1982. Okay.
Strawberry Alarm Clock.
No.
Oh wait, well that
would have been the 70s. And it's not Catch-A-Goo-Goo, your favorite band either. This 82? Is 1982. Okay, so let me set the stage here. In the fall of 1982, I was packing my bags and going to London for a year actually, of study with Central College from Pella, Iowa. They had a foreign studies program in Bloomsbury in London. Mm-hmm. And I got there and I immediately fell into the music scene and just started going to see show after show after show. Now, I never saw these guys live, but the radio over there was playing their music. The band was Squeeze. And 82, their
Squeeze.
greatest hits album came out. They had already kind of hit their peak in England, but they hadn't really blown it out in elsewhere in the world, especially in the US. And when their greatest hits album came out with a bunch of the songs off their previous albums, it had Tempted by the Fruit of Another, you know that song Tempted? It had Black Coffee in Bed, and then all these other awesome songs from their catalog. It's one of the great sort of pop bands. And at the time, people were predicting Squeeze was going to be the next, sort of sensible, lyrically complex, really gorgeous melodic pop music. They were going to inherit the throne of the Beatles. And of course, everybody has said,
What happened?
These guys are the next Beatles. Well, I think they kind of were ahead of their time, maybe a little bit. But the band kind of broke up. Jules Holland was in that band. He's gone on to host a number of really well-regarded music programs. Later with Jules Holland is the one now that you can see on BBC America, where he's in a soundstage and he's got maybe 5 or 6 bands arrayed on stages around him in a circle with bits of audience interspersed, and he goes around and he'll introduce a band, they'll play a song, and then he'll walk around the corner or walk around in the circle and introduce another band. Brilliant stuff. He's a fantastic keyboard player. But Difford and Tilbrook were the 2 guys that wrote a lot of the songs for that band, and they were just unbelievable. Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook, sort of like almost like an Eagles kind of melodic songwriting, but with a much more clever lyrical stuff. And actually Elvis Costello sang on a couple of their songs, and it's just this band that I totally fell in love with in 1982. And the reason I'm suggesting them now is that one of their songs, I heard it on the radio and I thought, man, I love that album. I have it in vinyl, don't have a record player anymore, so I went back and ordered it. Now I've been listening to it nonstop on my phone. So their greatest hits album is called Squeeze, singles 45s and under. It's their greatest hits album that came out in 1982. So
and how many albums do they come out with? So if I'm going through the Squeeze catalog, I tend to shy away from greatest hits albums as being like I don't know, I have a prejudice against them as someone who just like wants the primary source of the material. Having said that, I think some bands are better left to best of albums.
Well, I would say this. I agree with you on your greatest hits thing, but there are a lot of bands that'll have an album that only has one hit on the album, and you're buying a whole album of 12 or 14 songs, some of which are throwaways. Having been in millions of bands in my lifetime, when you're doing original music and you're recording it, there's a trade-off that goes on. Like, well, you've got 7 songs on this, and okay, we'll put 1 or 2 of your somewhat okay songs on the album just to make you happy. But Squeeze, they've got their albums. I'm just looking here. Their albums and their singles go back to literally 1977. I highly recommend them if you're somebody who loves sensible pop and really clever lyrics and great melodies, great arrangements. Their songs aren't the 3-chord stuff that you hear nowadays on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Or
so kind of like cut from the same cloth as someone like an Elvis Costello who played with them. As you're talking about this, I'm trying to think of who else I know that might be. If you like this band, you'll like Squeeze.
Yeah.
So I'm going to definitely check it out.
Good. Okay. Well, that's all I've got for this episode. How about you? Isn't it time for you to go back to Costa Rica?
Yeah. No. I'm heading down to South Texas tomorrow. By the time this podcast comes out, this will already happen. I'm heading down to South Texas for the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival.
Nice. Well, I wonder if somebody's going to find a super rare bird again.
Well, what they're seeing a lot of right now down there is the Tamaulipas crows.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
There are numerous sightings, and I don't know if it's the same 2 or 3 birds that are just really making their way around the South Padre Island area or not, but they're being seen right now. So that's going to be good. So heading down there, and so that's my next adventure. Green jays, chachalacas, more great kiskadees. I've seen more kiskadees in the last couple of weeks than I have seen robins and cardinals.
Well, it's a tough life you lead, Ben Lizdas. It's
true.
You road warrior. Just gotta get in an airplane and go someplace fabulous to see birds.
That's right. Listen. Well, next time we have a podcast, we can talk about the less glamorous aspects of that, like the state of my laundry.
Right. Did you ever get that Superfund money from the EPA for your laundry?
Exactly.
All right, buddy. Hey, listen, when you're down there, don't leave your cheese in the car, okay?
Definitely not. Man, you need to have a mess on your hand for sure.
Right. All right, buddy. Listen, safe travels via Con Dios. And
thanks. Good talking to you again, Bill. And
next one we'll record in person.
I like that idea.
Okay.
I like that idea. That's a commitment we're making to our readers right now.
We are. Our listeners.
Listeners. Yeah.
We'll make that commitment full on. All right, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right. See you, Bill. Cheers.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Out There with the Birds. Special thanks to Koa, our optics sponsor. Learn more about their fine line of birding products at sportingoptics.coa-usa.com. We're also supported by the Reader Rendezvous Birding Adventures from Birdwatchers Digest. Your next birding adventure starts at birdwatchersdigest.com/rr. Tune in next time for some more noise from the boys, Bill and Ben. Until then, keep your feeders filled and your gardens tilled, and we'll see you out there with the birds. Bye for now.